Yeah, that's right. I see the chat. I see y'all rocking. I see y'all coming. Hit that like button as you enter the building. You know what I'm saying? Hit that like button. Show your love. Show your support. You know what I'm saying? This that dope soul. This that new thing. Nobody don't know about it.
Hello, Knick family. Welcome to Lunchtime Live with me, Stephanie, aka Queen, and Tony Crowe from Knicks and Bruises. Got a lot to get into today in a short amount of time, talking about the aftermath of the Julius Randle for Karl Anthony Towns, DiVincenzo, and others trade. How you doing, Tony?
I'm doing good, Queen. I'm excited. You know, season's right around the corner. I think media days today.
It is.
Time to go. It's time to go.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, training camp starts tomorrow. Yeah. From what I understand, Karl Anthony Towns nor Julius Randle will be at the respective media days because the trade has not been finalized. So it would have been interesting to hear from Towns, but it's so quick. He probably needs time to process it, and Randle as well.
Hey, he is at the facilities.
Oh, Towns is okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And he bought a house here recently, so he has a place to stay. Doesn't have to worry about that. Let's start off with a real easy question before we get into the potential upsides and downsides of the trade. And then I also want to touch on Leon Rose, basically this being a move that will define his legacy or get him fired. But before we get into that, let's start with an easy one. We've had some time, a few days, to kind of let the trade soak in. What's your thoughts? What's your thoughts now?
Well, I'll be honest. Initially, I was lukewarm. You know, I wasn't too excited about it. I wasn't really too upset about it. I had an inkling a while ago. You know what I mean? Like Cat, and I went on record. I said I think they're gonna move for Cat. It's not a guy I want, but I think that's the guy they're going for.
Mhm.
And I always looked at it as I wish we could get him alongside Randle as opposed to for Randle.
Right.
But I calmed down. You know, I missed your show. I missed everybody's show. I just wanted to sit with my thoughts alone about it and get my perspective without any influence or anybody steering me one way or the other. And I've come to terms. I like the move. I don't think we're done. I think this was we were always talking about how patient this front office was or you know were, and I think they, you know, it started with McHale, but it's all chips in, and they going for it. Can't be mad at that as a fan. That's what you want as a fan, right? Let's go for the go for the glory, go for the goal, and I think that's what they did.
Yeah. What do you think was their motivation? Was it just strictly a talent winning thing? Was Randle not signing an extension part of it? Like, what do you think? Was it a fit thing? What do you think was their motivation for making the trade?
Oof. I've thought about this a lot too. I think they had a number for Randle. I think it might have been lower than he wanted to accept, and I think that was the defining factor, because, you know, making this trade. Let me shout out Josh. I was texting Josh the other night. He's one of the few people I actually spoke to. But having the control of the contract is an important aspect right now, especially with the collective bargaining agreement.
Right.
Towns is under contract for 4 years. I mean, the money is a lot, but they control that contract. And not having Randle under contract, potentially being able to lose him for nothing, I think that was a big factor.
Yeah. I put out a video last night. I'll if I get a chance. It's hard to move around when there's only two people, right? But if I get a chance, I'll drop the link for it in the chat, but the 5 questions I had surrounding this trade. But one of the things I forgot to talk about was just that, Tony, that Randall not signing an extension. And I'm not saying this is fault. He already took a pay cut. And to your point, the Knicks had a number they weren't willing to go beyond, and maybe he felt like, no, that number, doesn't work for me. So we could talk about, the center position and Mitch not coming back and needing to fortify that position. And we could talk about fit, but that is a key part of it as well. You don't want to risk losing Randall for nothing. But not only that, you don't want to have to trade him now in the middle of a season near the trading deadline where you're probably not going to get as much back for him because people know you want to move him. But second, that really interrupts the team's continuity and chemistry, right? So I think all of those, and you can argue that may have been the number one factor and moving him beyond the center stuff and the fit stuff. I think one question I've had, and I always had for probably the past few months, is why do you have to give him a number? Why were you not willing to max out Randall, which would have put you in a second apron? I mean, technically not, but once they filled out the roster, they would have been in the second apron. But that wouldn't have happened for another year or so. So you would have still had some flexibility to see this team and pivot, um, if you needed to, and you would have still had the bench depth and flexibility to cover for injuries for a wing player, right? And so they didn't want to do that. But yet they locked themselves into Cat, who's on a max extension. You're not going to super max extension. You're not going to be able to improve the team. So you're not going to be able to pivot. And you lost some of your bench depth, right? And so it's like, you didn't want to lock that team in because you wanted to see just in case you had to pivot, but yet you locked yourself into this team sight unseen. This is more about on paper, this team will gel and what have you, but we don't know that. And they locked themselves into it. And lastly, it's not like Cat doesn't have questions of his own. It's not like we gave up our flexibility and our bench depth for a bona fide player that we know is going to perform in the playoffs, is going to be healthy. You can't, you never know, but doesn't have an injury history. It's not like we pushed our chips for that type of play. We pushed our chips and locked ourselves in with someone who has questions of his own.
If I could respond, because this is another thing that kind of I was definitely thinking the same way. Initially it was really all about the question marks with Cat. Rather than just looking at the positive, I immediately tried to look at all of the negative aspects. But after a couple of hours thinking about it, because I came up with that same question, but then I asked, or I retorted to myself, what any player is gonna have question marks. Like that, you can't really name. Like if like let's say Embiid was on the table, there's question marks for him, right? Those same type of injury question marks. Can he get a team over the hump? Because he hasn't done it yet. You know what I mean? Like there's question marks with Giannis, even as far as his fit or what we wanted when we talk about stretching the floor and playing 5 out. He's not a knockdown shooter. You know what I mean? So when I looked at it from the perspective of, all right, no matter who we went for, the biggest name or not, it was going to come with some question marks anyway. And then those other guys, those other names, and Giannis, Jokic, whatever, the guys that we were like, I'm only trading Randall for, those guys aren't available. So the fact that Towns became available,
Right.
or you know what I mean. Now it's like you got to move, you got a decision to make.
Yeah. Would you agree it was a gamble though?
Oh,
Even
absolutely.
though, to your point, who else was available? You trying to get this done before the season. If he doesn't sign this, extension, you're thinking about all the negative ramifications of that. So let's try to get something done before the season. Who's available before the season? So I do get that point,
I,
but it
I
is a gamble.
I also think this trade has been in discussions for quite a long time. Um,
Yeah.
if you go back middle of the summer, we've seen, or not even middle, a couple weeks ago, we seen the Randall cryptic tweet of the truth will come to light. The same quote that KP put out after he was traded. You seen Mitch put that same tweet out, or that same message out on social media as well. I think they were looking at this as a trade deadline move. I think initially they were looking to see what they had with the guys, that we all assumed they were coming into the season with.
Mhm.
And then I think a couple of things happened that sped the timeline up and made them have to make the decision immediately. One of those things being, I mean, obviously we didn't hear the reports until after the trade, but DiVincenzo's perceived unhappiness with reduced role coming off of last year, and him being quoted as not being a fan of the quote unquote Nova Knicks narrative. So I think initially that trade, the Knicks were trying to push Mitchell Robinson and Randall as the main pieces of the trade. I think once DiVincenzo, and this has been reported, once Minnesota knew DiVincenzo would be included, or the Knicks were willing to include him, they became more acceptive to making the trade. So once they knew it was a green light on both sides, I think they had to make that decision. And don't discount Minnesota. If they were willing to move Towns, don't discount the Knicks not being the only team they were in discussions with. So if they got a green light somewhere else, there's quite a few teams out that need a center just as bad as we did. That might have sped the timeline as well. I heard the Pelicans were willing to center a trade around Brandon Ingram.
Mhm.
And that might have definitely sped that timeline up tremendously.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And kudos to the front office. I think this was a factor, maybe not, but I wonder if it was a factor in thinking about the Donovan Mitchell trade and not wanting to include Grimes or whoever. Like this, not that they didn't want to include Grimes, but probably Grimes was just at all of this and Grimes on top. No, thank you. And then losing the trade, maybe overplaying their hand, not knowing or not thinking there was another team in the mix. I'm pretty sure that was in the back of their mind too. Like, we can't let this get away for DiVincenzo, because from what I got from it, they were reluctant to include him. It's not like that was their first offer. They were reluctant to include him, but at the end of the day, they decided, unlike with Donovan Mitchell, we can't let this stop. We can't let this stop the trade. You on mute, Tone.
Shout out to you, Queen, because you brought that question up, not too long ago, when we was talking about, will they be willing
Yes.
to dip into that Nova part of the team to make a move. And
But kudos to you, because you said yes. You said exactly what happened. They might be reluctant, but at the end of the day, I think they would do it if it upgrades the team. I wasn't so sure. I asked the question, but I wasn't so sure of the answer. And it's good to know that they would do that. Do you think they spoke to Brunson, or at least let him know?
I do. And not saying that Hart would have moved the needle as much as Dante would have from the Minnesota side.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think if Brunson had to choose which Nova guy to include, it probably would have been Dante. So yeah, I think they did. I think he greenlighted it. If they gave him that option, I think he greenlighted it.
Yeah. Let's get into the upsides of the trade. We'll get into the downsides as well. What are the upsides? Another way of asking it is, how do you think this helps us? Your thoughts on the positives, upsides of this trade.
Karl-Anthony Towns at the center position gives us a dynamic we have never had. The closest thing to it was KP, and he didn't play much five.
Post Patrick Ewing.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But even Patrick Ewing, this is a different dynamic. Right. You know what I mean? He's a different type of center. He's a different type of center than Patrick. I would definitely say best center we've had since Patrick, but it's a different dynamic. The way he stretches the floor, I'm not going to quote Karl-Anthony Towns and say he's the greatest big man shooter, but he believes it. You know what I mean?
And the stats may back him up as well.
For sure, especially efficiency wise. He's on point.
Right.
But that's the biggest one. I mean, that center position being solidified with the scorer, not just I'm not gonna say just the defender, because that's one of the question marks we'll get into later. But the offensive threat that he is at that center position, you gotta put him tops in the league. Matchups with Embiid, matchups with KP. Now we have that same type of dynamic offensively to go at those teams that were gonna come at us that way. So that, to me, that's the number one. That would be one on my list. What he brings, individually at that position.
Yeah. No doubt about it. I think it definitely raises the ceiling on our offense. Think about it. That's one of the reasons why we were leaning into small ball, to have that 5 out where everyone on the court can drive, shoot, pass. We have that now with size. Right? Even if Josh Hart is in the starting lineup and he has to play, whether he plays the 3 or whether he plays the 4, you can argue we might be a little short after Cat in that starting lineup with maybe not, maybe a little. But the rebounding for his size, right? If you focus on the size, you miss what he's able to do at his size, right? So there's not going to be any drop off as far as rebounding is concerned. But we'll talk about that. But the ability to play 5 out, everybody on the Knicks starting unit has to be accounted for. There'll be no double teams. Everybody has to stay home. Cat is bringing the center out to the 3-point line, not the foul line like iHeart did, to the 3-point line, opening up cutting lanes, opening up passing lanes, and Cat can pass the ball. He can hit now. I think he averages 3.2 assists for his career. He averaged 3 assists last year. And there's been times when he's averaged 4.9 assists, a couple of seasons where he's averaged 4.4 assists. He can pass the ball. Now, he's not a playmaker on the level of Randall. He's not like a secondary playmaker where you're going to give him the ball and Brunson can rest for a few possessions while Randall is running the offense. That's not going to happen. We lose that actually with with Cat, and hopefully Bridges can step into that secondary playmaking role. But it really helps our offense. And another way it helps it is when Mitchell Robinson gets back. He and Rudy Gobert had a good relationship in terms of the lobs he threw to Rudy, right? And so if Mitch is still here, there's reports that the Knicks are shopping him or teams are calling. But if Mitchell Robinson is here, that big to big dynamic on the offensive end with him being able to hit Mitchell Robinson for lobs, that's going to help, Mitch as well. And forget about the playoffs. We don't have to worry about them crowding Brunson and game planning to our weaknesses, because offensively there will be few. There will be few. So, and then I didn't even get into the pick and roll and the pick and pop with him and Brunson, and then having the shooters OG and Mikal for outlet passes on. Yeah, the offense is gonna be sick. Yeah, the offense is gonna be sick. Any other upsides?
Well, the flip side of that same coin that you were just referring to, as far as him being the playmaker, not being the secondary playmaker or what have you, and to your point, he is a good passer. So even though he's not the same type of playmaker that Randall is, he still can make plays. Right. To your point. But on the flip side is he's phenomenal off ball. He's an off ball efficient scorer. So you're not losing that much points wise, right? If any, when you're just looking at the numbers in between the two. But one of the knocks on Randall over the years from Knicks fans, from people outside of not Knicks fans, but who critique, was referencing Randall as a black hole, right? And him needing to pound the ball before he could get to whether it's his scoring or his playmaking. Mm-hmm. Cat is the opposite of that. He's making quick decisions. It's just like phenomenal off-ball threat, just like OG, right? But more efficient, more volume. You know what I mean? So it's almost like for the people who didn't like Randall, they have to love this trade. Like they have to be, you know what I mean, over the top with it. Because I think he brings the opposite dynamic of Randall, but just as efficient. I mean, more efficient, but just as productive. So it's like a win-win in a sense.
Yeah. Brunson gets better. I mean, he'll have more space to do what he does. It's amazing that he was able to do what he did in the limited space that he had, particularly his first year in New York when we had RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, and Mitchell Robinson. So he'll have more space to do what he does. I was looking at the stats when he was in Dallas. He finished very well at the rim, and that went down significantly when he came to the Knicks. And I think part of that is because Dallas played 5 out. I don't know if it was all the time, but they played 5 out a lot. And so if we're gonna have this type of team, we may see Brunson getting to the rim more and finishing better at the rim without a center coming over and making it difficult for him. I'm trying to think any other upsides. Yeah.
No, I was just saying I referenced I was specifically talking to like the Cat, you know what I mean, the Cat dynamic of it. I think there's other positives. You know what I mean? You kind of just
for the team, for the entire team.
You just talked about it. I think what it does for Brunson is you know what I mean, it's gonna be great. Like we talk about that spacing, the spacing and the efficiency is definitely an upgrade. You know what I mean? The fact that he's a 7-footer is definitely a upgrade.
Yeah.
And I think he has that relationship with Leon Rose as a former agent. The Knicks have been, you know what I mean, he's been rumored as a guy, a target since Leon got here. The fact that he's played his best years under Tibbs.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? There's so many reasons that this trade made sense.
Yeah. And shout out to Captain Slim and the rest of the chat too. I appreciate you guys tuning in. He does have a post game. He does have a post game. So he can take advantage of the mismatches. I mean, that was a knock though that he didn't do it enough in Minnesota. But listen, he's coming from a team that went to the Western Conference Championship. Like, he's not coming from a team that never made the playoffs. He understands what it takes to win. He's also coming from a team that was number one in the entire league in defense. And he was it wasn't big despite Cat. If it was a lie, his coach told it. He was a part of them being that number one defensive team. And actually, he was ranked number 7 in defensive rating in the entire league last year. Take defensive rating for what it's worth. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was the case. So he understands, defense. He understands defensive rotations. He understands what it takes to get to a Western Conference Finals. So I say all of that to say, I think he's going to be amenable if, he has to take less threes and be in the post more. Obviously, you don't want to turn him into just a low pro because then you lose the advantage.
Spacing, yeah.
You lose the spacing. So he has a low post game. He can take advantage of mismatches. The key is that he recognizes it and does it, and not just, even though it's a smaller guy on him, still pull up for the same three or still pull up for the same jump shot. He has the potential to get better defensively. Think about it. Mitchell Robinson got better defensively under Thibodeau. Isaiah Hartenstein got better defensively under Tom Thibodeau. Maybe Cat gets better defensively over Tom Thibodeau. He's not a cone. Like, he's not a slouch. I think he's gonna be okay. Anything else before we get into the potential downtime?
Pitfalls. No, if I think of anything.
Went out. Yeah. I mean, the upside is, and we'll get into the injury history and things like that. But if he's healthy, and that's a big if, and if he buys in, that's another if for me. The ceiling on this Knicks team offensively is really good, and I don't think we're going to be a worse defensive team. I think Cat for Randall defensively is a wash. Randall is definitely better in space, but Randall wasn't always a willing defender. There was times when he would take the challenge, right? If we're playing Anthony Davis, if we take, Tatum, Brown, Durant, he would take the challenge, but he wasn't always a willing defender. So having all the talent in the world to do something and you don't do it, you're not reaping the benefits of it. Cat is not a good defender in space. He is foul prone. So that's something he's going to have to clean up. Tibbs cleaned it up with help Mitchell Robinson clean it up. Hopefully he can help Cat clean it up, because to me, center is still an issue. Behind Cat, we're back to Precious and Sims, but at least it's in a secondary as a backup and not as a starter. Chop Low, appreciate you. It's been a minute. All right. Let's move on to the potential downsides of the trade. What's the potential downsides?
And by the way, when I got cut off, I was just saying if I think of any more positive, we'll double back onto it. So,
Okay, yes, we will.
number one, number one on my list is obviously Cat's recent injury history. He started his career playing 82 games, 3 years in a row. But these last 5 years, I seen a stat where he's missed more games than KP in the last 5 years.
He's only
And
had, to your point, Tony. He's only had one 65 game season in the past 5 years. Only one.
yeah, and that is alarming. Um, I didn't even deep dive into what injuries have cost him to miss time. I haven't done a deep dive to see if any of these years it was relatively a losing season, so maybe they sat him back end of the year or whatever the case. I didn't look into any context into why he's missed all this time, but just that stat in the comparison to KP, very alarming for me. Especially when we're talking about, people bring up Randall, and that was actually, I've seen people say Randall's recent injury history is a reason why they they were down on him or wanted him moved. And I'm like we're Knicks fans. We seen how he got hurt both times. You know what I mean? We seen number one, they were freak accidents, both against the Heat. You know what I mean? We seen how it happened. You know what I mean? So it's not like it's through any faults of his own. Not saying Cat's injuries are or anyone's are, but we've seen the context into why he was hurt. So you can't put the blame on Randall in that aspect. So that's number one for me. And then number two would necessarily, one of the reasons why I've never been high on Cat was or is this contract extension that kicks in right now, the super max, that amount of money and the position it potentially puts us in moving forward. To be honest, the one time I actually was saying that I wanted us to go for Cat was, I think, 2 years ago, where we would have had at least one more year under that regular contract before the super max extension kicked in. But I'm confident in this front office in figuring it out. You know what I mean? I know it's going to be hard, difficult. I don't think it's going to be.
You went out, Tom. I just want to back up Tony's point about the injuries. I pulled something up on Google. In March of 2024, he tore his left knee meniscus while playing against the Portland Trailblazers. The other injuries was pain in both knees, especially his right knee, a cyst in his left ankle, a subluxated left wrist with ligament damage, and an aggravated joint on the middle finger of his right hand. Now, with the other injuries, it doesn't say if he lost time due to it or how much time he's lost, if any. Maybe he played through some of them, but those were his injuries. And 2 seasons ago, I think he only played 30, 30 games. But go ahead, Tony, continue.
Where'd I get cut off at?
I don't even remember.
Basically the injuries and how we're able to maneuver in under his contract with that amount of money. But again, I have faith in the front office in figuring those things out, because they've historically, we've seen what they've done. We got the capologists, you know what I mean? We got everybody in position to kind of figure these things out, specialists in these positions to figure these things out. Whether it's these second round picks that we have moving forward and finding the right guys that complement our team that way, you know what I mean? I think there's concerns there with the injury. We just brought in quote unquote one of the best medical staffs in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the concerns are there, but they have these pieces in place to kind of focus specifically on each one of these concerns. But those are my big two, and then I'll give you a chance to add, and we'll keep going.
Yeah, I agree with you as far as the injuries. That's a concern, and it's interesting. Oh, we need to trade for a center because Mitch hasn't been available, and we're dealing similarly with with Cat. So I'll double down on the injuries. The bench is thin. We got to figure it out. Deuce and Precious is now our leading players off the bench, and no disrespect to them, but it's different when you had Devo and Hart, who started, I believe, every game in the playoffs, leading your bench with McBride and Precious, to now having McBride and Precious leading the bench. I'm pretty sure McBride will be up, for the challenge though, and I do think the Knicks are going to do something to solidify that bench, and don't sleep on Landry Shamet. Watch my video I put out last night for my hot take. Don't count out Landry Shamet. I think he makes the team now. And just keep in mind, Devo wasn't Devo before he became Devo. If that makes sense.
That was one of my big points when I was texting with Josh, because that, obviously that's one of his biggest concerns, the loss of DiVincenzo. But I did have to keep preferencing that let's not discount the fact that last year was a breakout year for him. So his production, as great as it was, and it could continue moving forward, that wasn't who he was previously. You know what I mean? Like he jumped into that role and fulfilled it. So don't discount the fact that anyone else could, not anyone, but someone else can have that same type of a leap, given the increased opportunity.
Yeah, and think about Evan Fournier as well.
Absolutely.
So you have to wonder, not taking anything away from the respective players, but sometimes you run an offense and you have a system where you just need to plug in a good shooter.
And the opportunity may have helped them thrive.
Yeah. I will say, though, that Shamet won't have the volume because he'll be coming off the bench that a Fournier or DiVincenzo had. But don't discount.
Say it. Go ahead. Leak it.
Discount the possibility that Shamet starts, and which allows Bridges 3, OG at the 4, and allows our bench to be fortified with Hart coming off the bench. Like, don't count that out. Obviously, we have to see how he plays in training camp and how he plays in the preseason. But this is a guy, 53 playoff games, and he's played with Phoenix when they were a playoff and contending team. He played one season with Brooklyn when they were a playoff contending, a championship contending team. He played with Philly under Brett Brown when they were, I think, second or third in the Eastern Conference, and he played with the Clippers. So other than last year with Washington, which was a losing situation, out of the other, I think he's entering his 9th season. The other 7 seasons were with championship contending teams or playoff teams. So this won't be new for him. And he averaged 22 minutes a game over the course of his career, and I think about 19 or 20 minutes in the playoffs. So this is not like he's a journeyman like Devo was, but he has NBA experience, he has playoff experience, he's played on good teams, he's played on championship contending teams. It's not like we're bringing in someone who doesn't know what the playoffs are about. So don't sleep on Landry Shamet in a very defined role. We're not asking him to do much but hit an open shot, and I think he's a career 38% shooter.
Yeah, we're only asking him to do what he's best at.
Right. We only ask you to hit an open shot. That's it. Now you can argue that maybe we don't even need another floor spacer with Cat in that starting lineup because he's a floor spacer himself. if Josh Hart starts, he would be the weakest 3-point shooter in the lineup.
And just to piggyback off your point with Shamit, even if he doesn't start, right? The fact that
He can finish.
the fact that he's okay with what his role will be. You know what I mean? So like DiVincenzo not necessarily being happy with the reduced role, that might have affected his game moving forward. Less minutes might have made him less productive in a sense, or less efficient. It may have been more pressure to kind of be on fire right off the gate. You know what I mean? As soon as you come in the game, you got to hit these shots. Where Shamit,
right,
he knows that's what, you know what I mean? He knows that's what his role is, whether it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 15 minutes, like whatever it is, he knows I'm coming in to do this. And I would assume, he's okay with that position, whatever position it is. 15 minutes, you know what I mean? Play, don't play a game, you know what I mean? He's going to come in and do what he does without that saying, oh man, I could be doing more, I should be doing more. And I think that was going to be one of those, going back to the positives. Everybody's mad DiVincenzo's gone. I get it, I understand it, but once a guy is unhappy, that potentially turns into way worse things than a guy unhappy and being on a team trying to fit in. You know what I mean? We talked about Randall fitting in. Like Devo would have had to take a step back, and that is a hard thing to ask a player to do moving forward. He's trying to up his value. He's trying to, make the next contract his best contract. So to be in a reduced role, that's tough.
Yeah. No doubt he would have did it well and showed up every game, but you do make a good point. The other downside, so we talked about the bench and the injuries. There are two other downsides. One is the lack of roster flexibility, the ability to pivot if this team doesn't gel, if they don't develop chemistry and continuity, or if after a few seasons they're just not good enough, right? Boston had to pivot with Marcus Smart and Robert Williams the third under a different salary cap structure, though, right? The Knicks would have to try to pivot under this CBA, which is a little tougher, right? So that's a downside, losing the roster flexibility. And then also for me, I don't know if it's a downside or a question mark. And I talked to you about this yesterday, Tony. You didn't seem to have concerns over it though. Will Cat buy into the Knicks way of doing things? Team first, do whatever it takes to win. If that means you have to take less threes and play more down low, if that means you have to play center for the entire season, if that means you don't close games, I don't see him not closing games. But if, say, for example, that the team that's on the floor is playing really well, having to stay on the bench and not close the game because that team is he willing to do that? So I do have concerns about that. Everybody will say, yeah, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to sell out to the team until you don't close, until you're asked to do something you're uncomfortable with. So that's a little concern that I have. I'm not concerned about, I don't think he's soft. I don't have any concerns about that. But will he buy into the Knicks way of doing things?
And sometimes
Salute, Jeff. Go ahead.
Salute, Jeff.
Salute.
Sometimes I mix up concerns with question marks. You know what I mean? Like just to piggyback, I think this is kind of falls into that same realm. And I hate to keep focusing on Randall aspects, but I we've seen it year in and year out how he bounces back, right? So that was like one of those things where I was counting on a bounce back year from Randall. Now we got Cat, and now it's like a fit concern, if you will, or the fit question mark, but more like what you're saying. Does he buy in? And but I would put it more as a question more than a concern. But the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, that he's more of an off-ball scorer, I think that makes it a little bit more easier for him to kind of buy in or fit in to whatever role he has to, because he's not a guy that you kind of just give the ball to. I mean, you can at times, but he's not a guy that's just demanding the ball and I want to go to work. Everything runs through me. And I think the fact that he had the year he had last year with Minnesota, with Anthony Edwards kind of ascending as the season went on, and then by the end of the year, it's like definitive. All right, Ant is the guy.
Right.
And it seemed like this was still one of Cat's best years. So I think maybe it takes a little time for the adjustment, which obviously we should expect that anyway. This is you talked about a month ago. This is a new team. This is really a new team. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, this is really a whole new team. So yeah, it's gonna take some an adjustment period.
Yeah, for sure. Geoff, we're on a tight schedule because I got to get out of here by 12. But the question on the table was, are there any downsides to the trade? We talked about injuries. We talked about lack of cap flexibility. We talked about buying in, and we talked about one other thing. But if you want to piggyback on any of those points or have a new point, feel free.
I think losing DiVincenzo's shooting is the biggest thing. I mean, he was an elite shooter, and he did it on high volume, and he's a really good basketball player. And so, I mean, to the point where that was what Minnesota wanted to make the deal happen. And so, from a surface level, you look at Randall's stats and you look at Cat's stats, and they're rather similar. Towns is a much more efficient player as far as shooting the ball, but I mean, if you just look at their raw numbers, what they bring to a team, it's rather similar. So, from that aspect, when you add in DiVincenzo, you're kind of paying a premium for getting Towns. Now, the reason that you pay that premium is positional flexibility. Towns has played the five before. He can play the four. He can do either one. And so you have a situation where Mitchell Robinson is not going to be healthy. And so I think you kind of had to make this move if it was available. I love Julius Randle, but I was one of those who kind of saw this coming, and don't be surprised if Mitchell Robinson is the next shoe to drop, because if you recall, I kept saying the front office didn't bring these guys in. They're not their guys. And so don't be shocked if they go completely with a roster that's their guys. I mean, if you're going to try and make a championship run, you're going to do it with the players that you handpick and that you hand choose. I think that from a contract perspective, it kind of means that maybe they were further apart than I thought as far as what Randall was expecting on a new deal and what the Knicks were willing to pay. And you know how this front office works. If they can't work out the extension that they think is reasonable, you're on the move. Emmanuel Quickly, hello. So I think from those standpoints, it makes sense. It's a risk, but all moves are risks. I think from your standpoint, Queen, you've got to be thrilled, though. We can finally play that 5 out. Everybody's a threat on the floor basketball that you've been clamoring for the better part of 2 years. And I honestly think that Robinson's days are numbered. I think from just salary standpoint, from a lot of other things, I don't see him as part of the long-term solution with this team at this point. I think we're moving in a different direction. Time will tell whether that's a positive direction or not, but I tend to think that it is. Because the other thing that I'll say, and I know you're short on time, so I'll
Because I
close.
do have one other question I want to get in.
Okay.
But yeah,
And the other thing is, I think that speaks to how confident they are in a Mikal Bridges leap.
yeah, no doubt about it. We're not going to be able to get into the car. I have to change the thumbnail now because I wanted to talk about Leon Rose, and this is probably a show in and of itself. Leon Rose's legacy. Like this was an all-in move for him. It was a gamble, and this is the move that's going to define his legacy. The Knicks go on to win a championship is brilliant. This falls apart for whatever reason, he's fired probably, right? So this move, his legacy to me is built on Cat and how this team does. But the last question before we get out of here, because we got Tony at 12, real quick, we have 5 minutes. Do the Knicks have a better chance to compete or beat the Boston Celtics in a 7-game series with this move, Tony? A better chance than we would have had we not made the change. I mean,
I think so. And it's funny, right before we started this show, I was watching I think they call it Green with Envy. It's a Celtics podcast.
Mhm.
And their show was about the Knicks and this move.
Really? Can you
I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you. I didn't even finish because we started while I was still watching. But it's two guys on the show, and they had different perspectives. So it was very interesting. The first guy thought 100% this trade made us more of a threat to the Celtics in particular than prior to. And then the other host, he felt opposite, and he was referencing that they didn't have a guy to really stop Randall. So he was like, he was too strong for he was too strong for Brown, that Tatum had problems with him, etc., etc. But I think this does 100%. Before the trade, we weren't really. I mean, we had that same kind of idea that they didn't have a guy to stop Randall, but the real preference of it was we got Mikal, we have OG, the guys that are kind of not stop maybe, but slow down their main two guys. And I think our biggest concern was the matchup against KP, right? And this neutralizes that threat. You know what I mean? So even with us not having Randall, I think if anything, it evens that playing field, right? As far as their top three guys, our top three guys. Now what comes into effect though is the effectiveness of Drew Holiday, the effectiveness of
Derek White.
But I didn't mention Jalen Brunson yet, right? Where even with those two good defenders at the guard, I don't think either one of them are stopping Brunson. So I think we have the plus there. And then we have Josh Hart, who gives us similar type dynamics that or effectiveness that Drew Holiday's and White has. Maybe not the offensive threat that those guys are, but definitely holds his own defensively, brings a rebounding aspect that neither one of those guys kind of do. So I think if we're not over them, I think we even that playing field, and now it's really, it might come down to coaching at this point. You know what I mean? It might come down to X's and O's and schematics, game plans. It might come down to those things because talent-wise, I think we're right on par. But they got the experience. I'll give them that and the chemistry, what I mean, of years and years of being a core. Like we just said, this is a new team. So we might have to build to that.
Yeah. before I get Geoff, I just want to put this up real quick. East Blue Drew, I keep hearing Mitch for Trey Murphy the third, from your mouth to God's ears. We get Trey Murphy the third on this team. Oh my goodness! Or the other cat? What's the other cat? They probably not trading him.
Oh, Herb Williams.
Herb Jones.
Queen, it's on my docket. It's on my docket.
Oh, somebody in the chat said if they get Trey Murphy the third, they would shut up. You know, but that lets me know that the Knicks understand that they need to fortify the bench. Geoff, real quick, do the Knicks have a better chance to compete with the Boston Celtics with this trade rather than had we not traded for them?
I do, because I think you're not playing people out of position as much. I think that now you have people slotting into more natural places where they play, with OG at the 4, Bridges can play the 2 or the 3. It doesn't really matter. But McBride and Hart are in roles that they're more comfortable with. And I honestly think that we buried some people on our bench because we did have DiVincenzo. So I kind of think that the depth may not be as serious an issue as some people may think. But I guess I'll save those thoughts for another time.
What did you think we buried for Devo?
Well, I think that it was difficult to find minutes for Deuce. I think Campaign certainly got buried. Tyler Kolek, if you're confident in him, certainly was out of the rotation entirely. And Landry Shamet, if this is a guy who's going to make the team, really difficult to find minutes for him with Dante in the lineup. And so you have 3 or 4 guys and Deuce was going to get time anyway, but now Deuce is going to get a lot of time. And that's a difference. And so I think from the perspective of a lot of the depth that we seek may already be in-house.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys something really quick. To get Troy Murphy third, if it took Mitchell Robinson and McBride, just hypothetical, would that be something you think the Knicks should do?
I'll do it. I might do it. I don't know what that money is. And I think we might.
You're right.
You know what I mean? Like I might. I mean, if it gives us more cap space too, you know what I mean? Like if that, I would need to look at that part. You know what I mean? Like how else does it help us? Like, does it give us some more space to?
The Knicks are second apron. This might be, and somebody who's more familiar with the cap, let me know. This might be the last season the Knicks can make any moves. The Knicks are a second apron team. So whether you're over by $2 or $20, cap space is not it's gone for the Knicks.
Well, what I don't mean like cap space, like free agent, like let's like targeting. I'm saying like just enough to.
There will be. You're talking about flexibility.
Yeah,
we're going to be a second apron team
this year. We're under the apron, so this year,
right?
Barely,
right. But what I'm saying for next year, we're going to be a second apron team.
No, I'm just saying if we move in both of those guys, we gonna have to make another small move this year. You know what I mean? Like fill in the roster type moves.
I don't think so, because if you move, and I would do this trade, but if you move McBride, you could just move Cam Payne right into McBride's spot. He's somebody with playoff experience. 20 minutes on the Philadelphia Celtics last year, championship contender, averaged 10 points a game. I'm not saying that I'm advocating the Knicks move McBride, but what I'm saying is
if it takes him.
If it takes that, there's somebody on the bench that can fill in McBride. We have Troy Murphy third.
Queen, we're gonna start the next show right with this topic. So we'll bring it right in there.
Geoff, yes or no? We got to get out of here. Yes or no? Would you do?
Maybe. I have to think about that. So I can't. You can't spring that on me that quick. But my gun to my head, probably yes. But I would have to look at that a little bit deeper. Just to. That's a great question.
Fair enough. We're on Tony Crowe's show, Knicks and Bruises, while this lunchtime live train keeps moving. All aboard. Shout out to my guy, DJ Shuttle, in the chat. Appreciate you guys.
Sister, you one of a kind.
Yes.
Sister, it's time you
That's
shine. Dope Soul.
Where you at?
Dope Soul.